Is it okay to work for a climate villain? That was the question last fall posed to Kwame Anthony Appiah, who is the ethicist who writes a weekly column in the New York Times Magazine looking at ethical quandaries. And this was a fictitious law student who was graduating from one of the prestige kind of Ivy League schools. And he had written into the ethicist saying, I'm from a poor family, I have a lot of debt, and I could go to work for a big firm and make an awful lot of money, but I would be representing some companies whose practices I really abhor. But I could pay off my debt, help my family, and then maybe later on I could go and work for a cause that I believe in. And the ethicist responded and said, you know, we ought to live in a country that has rules and regulations that protect our planet, and we don't. That's not your fault. It really isn't a problem if you go ahead and work for this company. Everybody needs legal representation after all. And maybe you can make a lot of money and then fund some attorneys at other, not-for-profits that protect the earth. And then Robinson Meyer, who is the young climate writer for The Atlantic, responded and said, yeah, no. And he was reflecting on his own experience 6 years ago now, being at Standing Rock. Remember the Dakota pipeline? And he was in the courtroom where that case was going to be decided. And he said the courtroom was largely empty. There was the judge, and there were like a dozen journalists, and then there were the law teams, and there was a long row of young attorneys, the best and the brightest, sitting behind the big oil company. And he went on to say, that's really the very last thing that we need. We really need the best and the brightest to be defending the earth. And he used the example of Trump. He said normally presidents are sued for a lot of things, right? They pass a lot of rules and regulations like Biden and the student loan thing, right? Going to be tied up. Normally presidents have really good legal representation, and normally they win about 70% of their cases. Trump couldn't get good legal representation. Remember how the big law firms refused to defend him during the Russian probe early in his presidency? And all along, he had trouble getting good staff in his education and his energy department. And a lot of people just wouldn't represent him. And so Trump lost 78% of his cases. Instead of winning 70%, he lost 78%, which means, as bad as he was, he could have done a lot more damage, right? But he didn't have good legal representation. And so the guy was making the point, our actions matter. You know, we need all of our best gifts to go towards saving the earth. But then, the little young climate reporter didn't exactly let us off the hook, because he said, well, there is one good reason to hope that good people work for big oil, and that's because we use a lot of it, right? We drive and we fly. It's in our clothes, it's in our glasses, it's in our furniture, it's in our lotion, it's in our toothpaste, it's in our tennis rackets and our golf balls. It's kind of in every single thing. But we also know that all of that consumption is destroying the earth and destroying the earth's creatures. And long before there were climate writers or ethicists for the New York Times, there was the scripture. And it tells us what? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Every single thing on this planet comes to us as an amazing gift. You've ever held a tiny baby? You know. You can know the science, and you know something here beyond anything I could have created, right? And our role in this precious planet is so clear. We are called to till and to keep the earth. And the word keep is really broken down for us. We did this earlier in Lent, that beautiful Psalm 121. God neither slumbers nor sleeps. God keeps us. Shomar is that verb, and it means to keep, to watch, to guard, to protect, to see. That's what we're supposed to do. That word shows up 6 times there. That is our role. We are supposed to guard one another, protect one another, keep one another, see one another, not just one another, but the earth. And then it expands. I mean, we know that then there's the rupture in that story in the 3rd chapter of Genesis where they overreach and then they're afraid. And then we're called to keep our brother. And instead we see this kind of, again, this fear, this idea that Cain is not enough. He doesn't have enough. Abel has more. Maybe Abel's preferred. And so there's the act of violence. And then it goes on, and there's more violence, and it spreads to their grandchild, and it's sevenfold. And it just one act of violence becomes many acts of violence. And so this story that is foundational goes from this gift to rupture to ruin. And God there in the 6th chapter says, oh my God, I wish I hadn't ever even made these people. Every single inclination of the human heart is evil all the time. I will wipe them all out. I will destroy the creatures, the birds of the air, all of it, because my heart is grieved. It is all ruined. We've heard the word keep 6 times in that beautiful psalm, and now 4 times, ruin, 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 ruin. God is just sick. When I saw that picture of Andy Lister, the 84-year-old who shot Ralph Yarl, my second thought was, what a sad, pathetic old white man. And my first thought was, who else should be charged in this crime with him, right? Who made that gun? Who sold him that gun? Who profited from that gun? Who stood with the NRA in having the kind of laws we have? Who's behind Fox News? Who told this man that he should be afraid of a young black man who would have happily carried his groceries, right? Who would have picked him up if he had fallen down? Who are the people who have sown this hate and fear? And then his 28-year-old grandson came out and what? Broke it all down, right? Said, when I was a kid growing up, you know, we'd have fun, we'd play together. The last 5-6 years, it's just been 24/7 Fox News crazy. Everything that's wrong with this country is because of black men who are going to come for you, who are going to get you. I mean, just all that fear and hate. And yet, it's not where the story ends, right? In the story, it's ruin, it's rupture, it's ruin, and then it's the rainbow, restoration, relationships. And somehow this God comes to us. Right before the rainbow, God says again, these people are friggin' hopeless. It's not like, oh, look, they've gotten together, they're all good. No, it's like their heart is so bad and evil. Yeah, I'll put a rainbow in the sky, and as a sign what? As a sign that I will not give up on these people, as a sign that I will keep after these people, as a sign that I will do anything in the world to be in relationship with these people. Relationships, as it turns out, are what keep us safe. I think of Danielle Surratt. I've talked about her so many times. When she was a teenager, she got into trouble because guess what? Teenagers get into trouble. She was a young white woman, and she was greeted with all kinds of mercy. But her friend, a young black man, got a really tough, difficult, life-changing sentence. And she made a decision that for the rest of her life, she would work to change that until the system was healed or she died, whichever came first. So she started that group, Restorative Justice, and she just drips with eloquence. And she said, her work, guess what? Prisons don't keep people safe. Prisons make people less safe. They don't just damage the people in the prisons, they rip and rupture the community around them. You know what keeps us safe? It's not guns that keep us safe. It's not gated communities that keep us safe. It's relationships. It's being in connection with one another. It's having one another's back. It's speaking up to our relatives and our friends and calling people out for the hate. It's standing up. It's getting in a car and going to Jefferson City or Topeka and marching and changing together. When I saw the picture of the 1,500 kids from Staley High School walk out, I thought of another group of young people who had come together, kind of bringing this issue of environmental racism front and center at Standing Rock Reservation. It wasn't the young people who were seated behind the oil company. It was the young people who started that protest. I mean, a lot of us remember, it was like 7 years ago right now when it started. Remember the protest over the pipeline? Went on for 10 months. After a while, there were 10,000 people up there in the Dakotas on their reservation. But it started with 3 kids. And what they started was not initially an environmental movement. What they started in 2015 was an anti-suicide movement because the mental health crisis on the reservation was so out of control. Like in 2015, in a very short period, in a community of 1,300 people, like 30 youths attempted suicide. They're deaths of despair, right? The average life expectancy for an American is like 77. For a Native American, 47. I mean, it's drugs, it's alcohol, it's abuse, it's just no opportunity. And you know, we all know where that comes from, right? Genocide and broken treaties and boarding schools and fetishization of Native people through mascots and all that. And these people, these young people came together and they went to the tribal elders and they said, we have to have resources. And they started basketball teams and peer counseling and engagement experiences. And then when their suicide and mental health began to level out, they got active and they started speaking out about the Keystone Pipeline. Remember the Keystone Pipeline? And Obama stood with them, right? And Obama stopped that thing. And so then they thought, well, hey, Standing Rock, no one's paying attention to that. So they decided these young people, these teenagers started that movement. They said, we're going to start this sacred camp. They called it Sacred Stone at the entry to the reservation. And they had, they brought the elders, teach us the old ways and the dances and the rituals. And there was no drugs and no alcohol. And then they had new people came and taught them civil disobedience and nonviolence. And others came and taught them to be community activists and organizers. And then when they thought, we need more attention to this, you know what they decided to do? They decided to run 500 miles from Bull Run, North Dakota to Omaha, Nebraska to deliver petitions to the Army Corps of Engineers. And as they ran, they gathered more young people from more reservations, from more people who had been divided. They gathered together, and when they got to Omaha and they realized, we haven't stopped this yet, they decided, we need to run to Washington, D.C. And they took off running a relay to Washington, and young people who had been separated, sisters who were twins, who had been sent off to different foster care systems, were brought back together, running to save their land. And you know what happened when they got there? I mean, Obama stood with them. Great victory, probably one of the biggest environmental victories we've ever had. And then we know what happened. Trump came in and he rolled it down and he went right through their property. They still won. There is no losing when you come together with your people, is there? There is no losing when young people look at one another and say, you are so beautiful, you are a precious child of God. There is no losing. Ask Joseph White-Ears how he saved a friend who called him one day thinking it was the end. Ask Bobby Jean Three-Legs. She's the one who came up with the idea that we can just run and run and run. There's no losing, folks, when we come together, right? When we take to Jefferson City and Topeka and Washington, D.C., and we say, we will take this country back. You will not talk about our young people that way. You will not. These are God's precious children. You will not take health care. You will not take the rights. You will not take the library books out of this book. You will not tell us that this country was not founded on racism. We are not that stupid. There is no losing, folks. There is no losing when we stand together. When we say, guess what? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and we will be caretakers of this earth. We will not let you divide us and turn us against one another, because we are God's people, and we will stand together, and we will love one another, and that will be the rainbow in the sky, and that will be the last word. Amen. Amen.